Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kicking It Classic with JCD. I am your host, John JCD DiMaselli. And as always, Kicking It Classic with JCD is part of the ever-growing PWP Nation network. You can check out pwpnation.com for lots of great articles, editorials, interviews from the past, and so much more. You could follow PWP Nation on Twitter at PWP Nation, and you could follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/PWP Nation. You could also check out PWP's newest contributor, Ashley Rose Nova, at ARoseCPE for all her content. You could follow me on Twitter at NYC1219. You could follow the show on Twitter, Kicking It Classic with JCD, at KITCWJCD. You can check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Kicking It Classic with JCD. And you can email the show, kickingitclassicwithjcd at yahoo.com. So now the bills are paid. Of course, this is season 2. This is our 7th episode. One more to go before our end of season episode, which will be the 1997 Survivor Series coming next week. However, before we get there, we get here and we look at something that would have made all the sense in the world and should have happened. And what I'm talking about is, at some point in 1994, Lex Luger, WWE Champion? In a time when superstars would more likely jump from WCW to WWF, there was probably none bigger for where he was at the point of his career than Lex Luger joining the WWF in 1992. He had gone through the motions because of a clause with his WCW contract and is out. He couldn't appear as under the WWF banner for like the first year, so he was actually the focal point of the WBF Body Stars organization until he had a motorcycle accident in 1992, which would prove pivotal for the rest of his career. He would float around. He debuted in a narcissist gimmick, which was, whatever, conceited Lex Luger. Okay, it kind of makes sense, using the metal plate that was inserted in his forearm because of the motorcycle accident mentioned before as his finisher. And he was going through the motions. He worked a feud at WrestleMania 8 with Mr. Perfect. And it looked like post-WrestleMania, he was going to head into a feud with Bret Hart. And for the most part of the spring and early summer of 93, that was the program. And it went from where it would be a typical WWF feud in the sense that Luger, as the heel, would probably go over a face like Hart. It didn't happen that way. Hart started going over Luger on house shows, and Luger didn't even qualify for the King of the Ring. The way the King of the Ring brackets were set up in 93, you kind of thought Hart-Luger was going to be your final, and it wasn't. However, shortly after the start of the summer in 93, Luger disappeared for a little bit. And, no explanation, no nothing. And then the character would reappear on July 4th, 1993 on the deck of the USS Intrepid in the Yokozuna Body Slam Challenge. Luger would be the main event, unannounced. He would show up, everyone knows, with the helicopter, the fanfare. He would body slam Luger, and Lex Luger was on a rocket ship to SummerSlam 93 to challenge Yokozuna for the WWF title. Yokozuna was coming off a surprise defeat of Hulk Hogan, which played a big role in Hogan's departure in 93. And it seemed like, okay, Luger was the new pro-American hero facing the anti-American heel in Yokozuna at SummerSlam. Yoko's losing the title to Luger. Hands down, there's not a bigger lock than that. However, that does not happen. Luger would win the match, but he would win by countout and not win the title. And at the time, they were running a clause where if you faced Yokozuna and did not win the title, even if you won the match by DQ, by countout, whatever, you did not get a rematch. Okay, no problem. Luger's going to the 94 Royal Rumble. Is Luger going to win the Rumble? Because Undertaker then slotted into a feud with Yokozuna, and there was talk maybe Undertaker would win the title from Yoko, and would they do Luger, Undertaker at WrestleMania? Probably not. But that doesn't be an issue because Yokozuna defeats Undertaker at the Rumble, and then, okay, here comes the Rumble match. Lex Luger, they pulled a dramatic. He had a bounty on his head, and a bunch of guys attacked him earlier in the night. So they did a spot where, I want to say it was like number 17. And somebody was supposed to come out the end, and they played it up that was probably Luger. And then all of a sudden, a few spots later, Luger comes out. So it was like, all right, wait a minute, who didn't come out, in that spot? It turns out it was Bret Hart. Luger and Hart would do the infamous double elimination and both win the Rumble and both be headed to WrestleMania. This was questionable at the time because the night of the Rumble, Bret moved in to his feud with his brother Owen, so you would think Owen-Bret was the match for Mania, which it would end up being, but we have a little bit until we get there. Before we get to that, let's circle back to the mentality about Lex Luger. One would assume after the SummerSlam match, which Luger, again, won by countout, and Jim Cornette's no rematch clause, Luger led a team that went on to defeat Yokozuna's team at Survivor Series. So you could still see the ball in motion for Luger to get the shot. You would have thought the story would have been Luger winning the Rumble and then, of course, forcing Cornette and Yokozuna to give Luger the match at Mania. But again, with the Hart-Luger co-wins, you could kind of see something was brewing. But again, you could also make the case that maybe they'll use Hart to really elevate and legitimize Luger, which, would have made total sense. Now, the way they handled the co-winners of the Rumble was that between Luger and Hart, someone would face Yokozuna first at WrestleMania, the other one would have a match, and then whoever won the first title match would meet whoever had the basic match. Okay, makes sense. You started to think, okay, well, maybe it's not going to be Yoko Luger in the main event, but maybe they'll go the route of Hart Luger in a unofficial passing of the torch. Okay, no problem, makes sense. Luger and Hart was supposed to really have a big feud the year prior. That didn't really happen. You can now do that program with the title, and you could always have Yokozuna lurking somewhere on. Okay, no problem. So we go to Raw, and the options were, there was going to be a coin toss, and either Bret Hart would get the first shot at Yokozuna, and Lex Luger would face Crush, or Bret Hart would face his brother Owen, and Lex Luger would get the first title shot. That, to me, even as a 17-year-old fan, started to be worrisome to me that whoever had the first title match was not walking out as champion. Well, suffice to say, in order to cover all the bases, and this kind of makes sense when you really think about it, Bret loses the coin toss. Luger wins the coin toss. So now you've got Bret versus Owen Hart and Lex Luger versus Yokozuna for the title, the first match of the night. The first title match of the night for WrestleMania 10, with the caveat being both title matches would have special guest referees. Okay, no problem. Now, we're talking 1994, and we're not talking about the internets, the IWC, the Twitter, the Facebook, the Twitch, anything like that. You were basically getting physical newsletters, or you were calling up either a 976 hotline or a 1-900 hotline. Now, where I grew up in Queens, New York, 718 Queens Boulevard, we had 976-1111, which was Coach Kirk's wrestling line, which for a quarter on a payphone you could call. And rumors started to get out that, actually I need to rewind. WWE never taped TV the way they do today. They used to tape TV boatloads in advance. Usually, because you got to remember, we're still talking about the era of the Big Four only pay-per-view. And so they would probably tape in between the Big Four pay-per-views, and they would even tape stuff for after the next pay-per-view. So you would get, if you subscribe to a newsletter or called a hotline, you would get spoilers because they would tape material that had title changes on it like it was nothing. And this was no exception because you're still, not only do you have Monday Night Raw, but you're still in the era of Superstars and Challenge. And they went right up until WrestleMania 10. They did not go past, but they went right up. However, WWF at the time decided to give the fans one last treat at the end. Now, getting back to the hotline, there was a report about 2 weeks before WrestleMania that a segment was filmed with Lex Luger and the WWF title belt that involved Jim Cornette, who was Yokozuna's special counsel. No one had ever seen it until recently. Well, during the Superstars taping, at the very end of the taping, they cut to Vince McMahon with Jim Cornette doing the recap as they always would, and that wasn't heard by the crowd. That was something that was taped for the broadcast. But then all of a sudden, WWF does this.
World Wrestling Federation Champion, Lex Luger!
Yep, Lex Luger was brought out as WWF Champion to end the Superstars taping before WrestleMania 10. Now, a few things with this. There's the urban legends and myths, and then there's probably the reality of what happened. What that clip may not have shown or provided over the audio was a oh my god reaction from the crowd. Well, JCD, you're using some shoddy audio. It's 26 years old. While those things are fact, the problem is there was no reaction from the crowd. Some people say it's because the crowd had no clue what the hell was going on. Other people have said over the years that people were indifferent to Lex Luger, especially with the fact that Bret Hart was involved in this scenario, and there were people that still had a bad taste in their mouth from Undertaker not winning the title from Joko at the Royal Rumble. So Luger gets no reaction coming out with the title. Okay, so as far as the urban legend and the myths go, there's been that urban legend that Lex Luger, the Friday before WrestleMania, went to a bar in New York City, got drunk, and told everybody he was winning the title on Sunday at WrestleMania, and Vince got pissed and reversed the decision. Lex Luger was interviewed on PWP Nation back in, I want to say 2012, and said that part was an outright lie, that was not exactly accurate. Lex Luger has said that Vince just changed his mind and changed the plan. While I could see that being the case, because if you still look at how WrestleMania played out, Okay, Bret Hart faces Owen Hart in the opening match of the night. If Bret was not going to win the title from Luger, you could have booked that in a way that Bret would have defeated Owen, and that probably would have been the end of their feud. However, Owen beats Bret in that match, which of course was the catalyst for the Owen Hart-Bret Hart feud. Lex Luger faces Joko Zuna in the first title match and is disqualified by special guest referee Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig because one of my favorite lines ever, you do not touch the official. Luger was in a corner and he moved Perfect out of the way to get to Joko and Perfect. The clip is great. Perfect looks at his chest and looks at Luger and is ring the bell, you don't touch the official. So Luger was out of the title. I guess you could say with the way everything was laid out that yes, it is possible that plans were changed at the last minute. What I believe always happened was, I think Vince saw the reaction that Luger did not get to coming out with the title and decided that he was not going to go with Luger. And if you look at Luger post-94 WrestleMania 10, Luger does not do much. I mean, he ends up in that feud with Tatanka where he loses to Tatanka. He loses at Survivor Series. He's not even really a factor in the 95 Rumble. He really, if you want to talk about a guy that really lost a lot of his luster, it was Luger. And it's a shame because, he had so much potential coming from WCW, the total package. This was the guy that you could build a company around for the next 10, 15 years. And it just failed. I mean, by August of 95, he was already gone and back in WCW. And if he didn't leave, he was going to be in a feud with the British Bulldog, his former tag team partner with the Allied Powers. And he was going to put Bulldog over. So there it is. What happened with Lex Luger? Why did it never happen with the championship? I just think it was the fact that I actually believe, like I said before, I think it's due to the fact that Luger did not get a great reaction when they brought him out. I think part of it was just people didn't know what the hell was going on, and I think people who wanted to watch WrestleMania to be surprised and see what happens, I think you threw them off and turned them off. I mean, it ended up being the right decision because the Bret-Owen feud of 94 was fantastic. That SummerSlam cage match was great. I don't know what you would have done with Luger as champion, especially if he would have stayed a face. I mean, I think the bigger thing would have been maybe a rematch with Bret Hart, matches with Undertaker, but I really don't know what else. In hindsight, I mean, as much as it was wow, I can't believe this didn't happen, you look at it and it's you know what? It happened perfectly. So again, thank you so much for listening. Again, I am your host, John JCD DiMaselli. Next week, our final episode of Season 2, it will be looking at Survivor Series 1997 and what you may not know about everything that happened. I mean, I know everyone knows the obvious, oh yeah, duh, Bret left. But what went on leading to it? If you've seen Wrestling with Shadows, then you probably know most of what's going to be on the episode next week. But if you haven't, there'll be maybe something new that you learn. And, we hope you enjoy it. Again, I am John JCD DiMaselli. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.